We've been looking at matters education. We will go back to matters education as well, because CS Fred Matiang'i made quite a number of announcements yesterday that could mean a lot of changes in that sector as well. But before that, there's a very interesting story on page 8 of the Daily Nation. The headline reads, Judge Njoki's case put off until February. Now, the cross-examination of Supreme Court Judge Njoki Ndongo over an alleged strike that paralyzed the Apex Court 2 years ago has been pushed to February. We do have a lawyer, probably you're conversant with this case, even without discussing the merits or demerits of it. What exactly is happening there?
Well, this is an issue that's probably a rollover from the last leadership and presidency of William Mutunga, where there was a disagreement in the Supreme Court, and certainly some issues were directed at Justice Njoki Ndongo. I think that the difference was picked up in the public domain, and by that time, one Apollo Mboya was the CEO of Law Society of Kenya. Well, he has an activist approach to how he confronts issues, and he took the matter to court. One of the issues, ordinarily, when you're sued before court, you have to defend yourself, and therefore you have to bring your evidence, and she therefore has to testify before court. It was one of the issues that he has to come and testify and be cross-examined on the same. That didn't happen because apparently they are still writing the full text of their judgment. Remember, they didn't give
on
it.
The presidential election.
They were supposed to give it within 21 days, and because of that, that was the reason that was given before court.
But this is a very interesting happening, because up until now we've seen judges of the Supreme Court as the highest judges in the land.
Yes.
But you're saying that they too can be subjected to courts, like the High Court, which are lower than the Supreme Court.
They're not immune.
Yes.
They're not immune well, we sue judges and we defend judges. You know what happens is they also buy properties, they buy cars, they buy lands, they have problems here and there. Probably most of it don't come to the public, but that which is interesting.
This particular issue is interesting because it has to do with her conduct within the bench of the Supreme Court.
Well, it's very interesting because I do know that a mechanism upon which a judge can be sued and disciplinary action is taken is provided for in the Constitution and has to go through a tribunal. So I will be very, it will be very interesting to see whether the court in fact has powers to investigate her conduct in the first place, when in a sense the conduct of a judge and how you remove a judge is specified and coded in the Constitution as to how you go through it. But anyway,
so you're saying we will probably get to see a judge of the Supreme Court standing in the dock before a judge of a lower court.
That's a possibility. I do say so because many times that has happened. Judges get
not in our context.
It happens because judges get robbed. The judges, I mean, their cars get rammed into. I do know of a Court of Appeal judge whose wife was hit by a vehicle and died, and they were together. The one has to testify before a lower court, in fact sometimes a magistrate court.
Yes.
So that happens quite a lot.
Okay.
It's just that it's ordinarily packaged differently so that then it doesn't fall in the public domain, so they're protected. But this has a public interest factor on account of how it was brought up.
It is a very interesting headline on page 8 of the Daily Nation. Judge Njoki's case put off until February. Judge Njoki Ndongo should be appearing before the High Court on a case where she's been accused of an alleged strike that paralyzed the Apex Court. The case has been put off until February next year. So let's go back to other matters, back to education matters. Yesterday, the other major pronouncement made by the CS for Education was on textbooks and textbooks distribution. Previously, the government has been sending money directly to schools, disbursing money meant for buying textbooks. Then the school head teachers have to buy the textbooks themselves. But now the CS says that will no longer be the case, that the distribution of textbooks will come from the ministry, and each student will now get 6 textbooks for the main 6 subjects, which is math, English, Swahili, and the 3 sciences, chemistry, physics, and biology. And these textbooks basically have the coat of arms, meaning they're coming from government. Now this has implications. We've seen publishers have been making money from selling textbooks. Now what we've seen in other systems of government, where cartels, where people who have previously been making money from certain business lines, when that line is cut off, they usually are not very happy. That could be a line of resistance, which could also be counterproductive as well. When Apollo Cheng, do you see that risk this time around with that move by the CS?
I think from even what you can see around, the noise around the new program, you can start feeling that there's a lot of resistance coming from publishers, because first and foremost, you see, this is a livelihood. This is a whole industry that has been surviving through the other systems. So the thing is that they're going to fight it, because now you are going to kill a whole industry. There have been investments done. For me, what I would look at is if they could have a dialogue with the ministry on how they can work together, because we cannot rubbish their intellectual resource that they have towards this new program. So I think the best way for them would be not to resist as such, but just see how can we work together, because all of us want the best for Kenyan education. We're not fighting.
Yes.
But when we start putting money first, whereby where is my money cut out of this? Where is it going to come from? Is it going to be reduced or not? When we start having that, then we are putting the cart before the donkey.
But either way, publishers are going to lose, because even the CS mentioned that previously, even when they disbursed money for head teachers to buy the books, the amount at which they bought a single book is quite different. He talked about a book which previously was quoted at 795 shillings. Now when the government is procuring the same book, they're doing it 194 shillings. Even if the publishers were to come on board, clearly whatever they'll make from this deal is much lower than they've been making previously. Dr. Ogutu, definitely there will be some resistance.
There will be, for sure, but this just illustrates how hard it is to govern. It's not easy to make these kinds of decisions. I can see, for instance, Matiang'i deciding to do this just to ensure that all the schools get the books that they're supposed to get. But of course the pushback from the schools will be, you're choosing the textbook for us. I think in the previous system you could have different publishers who might even get some sort of stamp to show that their book is good enough to be used in the Kenyan educational system, and then it's up to people to choose which particular textbook of the ones that are approved you're going to go for. Once you get into that situation, now of course headmasters might cut deals with a particular publisher and maybe even inflate the cost, and that's just the general problem we have in Kenya of ethics and people not being ethical. So as CS, it's hard to make that call. You're saying, can I trust this devolution where people will make this decision? Can I be sure that the students will get the books? And him being the sort of person who wants to make sure the job is done might decide that I'm going to take the decision for them. I'm going to make sure the books get to them. I know I'll get hit and by people who say I'm taking all the business and giving it to one person, but I'm going to get the job done. So I don't envy him the decisions he has to make. In a system where you could actually trust the devolution, or in a system where you have good auditing, you can go to the schools and check that they've actually done the right thing. So maybe he's trying to get it done very fast and instantly, whereas I would have experimented. I would have said, for this 1 year, I'm asking you people to get serious, and I will send inspectors to make sure you do it, in which case you leave it devolved. If it fails, then now you say I'm taking executive action.
And this takes us back to the same argument we've been having about how one person and how they decide to do things changes quite a lot. Just during the break we were talking about how the former cabinet minister in charge of transport, the late John Mishuki, had to be moved from the Ministry of Transport after effecting such huge changes, and we actually blamed it partly on the cartels running the industry. Of course, there was that intended ban on 14-seater matatus, and the person who took over after Michuki actually balked under pressure. That was shelved, and we forgot about it. That means such kind of bravado, the one that we're seeing CS Matiang'i adopting, can we trust that anybody else coming will be able to stand up to the cartels? Exam cheating cartels, now publishing cartels. Not every other person can do that.
True. Not every person can do that. The reason for that is if you come and you're conflicted, your intention is not to do the job, but either to please, if you have a constituency that you're going to please, or if you come but you have a lot to lose, if gotten the position pursuant to some urging outside.
Yes.
For instance, you have masters out there who brought you, and that's happening a lot. There are people who would want certain CSS to be in because they're businesses that are going
And
to
that lobbying is really
and lobbying is
right
yes,
now. Yeah.
it's so rife right now. The reason for that obviously is because there are people who need to get the businesses, for instance, in transport, in oil, in education, and all that. So the publishers would rightly so want to lobby. By the way, lobbyists are a complete industry, for instance, in the US.
Yes.
If you want a legislation to be passed, you have to hire lobbyists for them to bring out the good and the bad. That's how in fact the gun industry is as thriving as it is in US. Now, it's very interesting how you can be left alone if you stand on your feet in this country. The central bank governor has had his issues.
Yes.
But what he has done, and one thing he's been resilient to, is this the law, and I'm applying it as is. And that's Matiang'i, and that's Michuki, and that's Magoha, and so on and so forth. So there are very few men and women who then we can look up to and say they stand up to something, and Kenyans continue to celebrate them. So those that enjoy the norm, getting into power, have buddies all over, and then live like any other person, you actually fizzle out. There are many other cabinet circulars right now we can't even talk about. We've forgotten them on account of the fact they came in, but there's nothing much they did except enjoy actually the perks as it were. But those that work selflessly are going to stand out, and they stick out for the reason that it is actually one among many.
Yes.
Otherwise, if everybody was working like Matiang'i, it would be the norm, and probably would not be recognizing Matiang'i because the others are acting.
But now he stands out. Dr. Ogut, you want to add something?
I think this might sound cliche, but I believe in power to the people, because so far we are focusing on individuals. Can Matiang'i do this? What would happen if we didn't have Matiang'i? Life would go on. And the reason that would happen is if we realized how much power we have as just ordinary people, we could get a lot of things done, even at the local level. So you go to a school board level. If you're a person who's on a school board, or you're a parent in a school, and you see something that's not happening, my child did not get the books that they were supposed to get, I can raise my voice. I can say what happened. I can raise it in the school board. I can have people discuss it, and the headmaster or the headmistress brought to order. And that means we get the control back. So we don't have to wait until Matiang'i does something to help us down at the grassroots. I think people should realize that we can actually do things on our own. We don't have to wait for an individual, a single individual. Let's take action at the school level, at the community level, and you'll actually see change happening. In the places where people decide to take action. The ones who let themselves be cheated, I don't know. It's harsh to say that you deserve it. But really, what were you doing when you were being cheated? Why do you just complain and do nothing? Don't just complain. Do something. Bring those people to order. And we'll see a lot of change. We don't have to wait for an individual. It should be beyond.
We should institutionalize it. That's very important. I think that has been the conversation on this table. Because once we have this personality cult, when this person goes, we start being nostalgic. And I think with the new program, parents are going to be more involved into it. I mean, they have put a section there for involving parents much more than they've been doing now. We need people to speak out. When you see something is not going correct, as a parent, I mean, you have invested in that school with your own child. So you need to speak out, and we need to start being more demanding. I mean, we've been on this talk for quite a while now, I mean, for so many years. But how come it is taking one person to do it, and then everybody else is quick to say that, look, we're going to do it together? I think the most important thing here is Kenyans need to know that they have a voice, you can speak out, and you can be part of the change.
Okay. My director tells me I have about 15 minutes to wind up. You derailed my train of thought there. But yes, we could look at a few other things. One other thing that he mentioned, and very interesting, was the inclusion of day scholar streams in national schools. And that's very interesting because national schools have been top of the cream. Don't touch those ones. Just leave them, let them be. They have the best infrastructure. But now this introduction of day scholars, let's say at Alliance High School, day scholars at other big schools, what kind of effect do we expect? I'm sure you must have attended one of those good schools.
let me put it this way. There's a very... I've been observing and thinking, and I think I was trying to put something down as at yesterday as to how Matiang'i is demystifying private schools with public schools. You know, for some time now, especially for primary schools, every middle class person with a child will run the child to a private school. Apparently, the private school has better system of education, but that's not true. It's not true because there has been. I think it's because probably the social circumstances of the school, of the private school, is different, and the packaging is different, and probably the resilience to work is different. But what we've seen in public schools, especially in the last results of the exams, means that public schools have become very competitive,
yes.
and most experienced teachers are in public schools. They just need to be made to work, and that has really helped, because now, honestly, you don't have to take your child. Though you have the money, you can save it for something else.
Yes.
You don't have to pay 100,000 per term just because you want the child.
That's a different argument about private vis-a-vis
yes.
public schools.
Yes.
But now, on the issue of national schools,
yes.
now having day scholar streams.
Now, what has happened is there has been this packaging, a narrative that national schools must be boarding schools, and therefore that you have a better propensity towards, getting results because you are in boarding school. But we've seen schools like Strathmore, for instance, where my colleagues come from. The high school is purely, I think, day school.
Yes.
But it's one of the best schools in this country, although it is private. Now, that is one of the examples that day schools can still be socialized such as to be the best performance, and therefore the introduction, I think, and experimental for that matter, of day streams in national schools, what we call national schools, the cream of schools,
yes.
is a very good thing, because
culture.
Yes, it complements. And by the way, the poor, because the fees for boarding schools is very high, the poor who do well can still work together and learn together in a day school with those that are the best in boarding school.
Yes, this culture that national school has to be a boarding school, of course, it needs a major shift it requires a major shift in our thinking, because yes, Strathmore is one of those. Actually, probably not many people know that there is a national school which is purely a day school, but all the rest of the schools are boarding schools. Now, having one stream for day scholars, and the rest maybe 2-3 for boarders as well. Don't you think that also will present a problem?
It will be a challenge, but it's not impossible. I agree with my learned colleague here, George, that in fact it's possible to have a day school that is very well run. I happen to have had the privilege to be the deputy headmaster of the school, Strathmore School, before moving on to the university. And I think one of the game changers, or two of the game changers, the quality of teachers and how you train them and incentivize them, and then also the involvement of the parents. The main reason why boarding schools outperform day schools is the fact that there's close supervision of the students every evening, every morning. They're in a controlled environment. And in fact, when I was working at the school, there were probably just about 2 day schools in the top 50 in the country, and that would be Strathmore School and Kianda School. But Kianda and Strathmore are run in a very similar way, in which the parents are involved in the education of their children. So there's actually somebody keeping an eye on them when they're at home, and also they're taught to work in an atmosphere of freedom, so that even if they're not being watched, in the midst of all the temptations, television, parties, they can still control their own time and train themselves to do hard work in the midst of those distractions. Whereas people in boarding schools, when they're now put in a free environment, like when they go to university, now they've not been trained in handling freedom. So I see many advantages in having day schools, because the parents get to be involved in the education of their children.
And that's the key thing. I think you just hit the nail on the head, the parenting. But Apollo Cheng, speaking as a parent now, I'll put you on the spot as a parent. This culture that once your child gets to a certain age, send them away to school. Now we're saying like, okay, fine, you might have to stick with them longer and see them through high school from home. That would require a major shift in our thinking as parents as well.
True. Okay, there's a need for a major mind shift in Kenya. You look at the headlines nowadays, I mean, in the newspapers. Many parents start complaining week 2 of the holidays that what are we going to do with these children? Take them away, take them to school. But I'm asking, whose children are they? Aren't you the first or the primary educator as a parent? Where do we learn our basic languages? At home. And you see, the school spends, let's say a day school. They spend half of the day with your child, but you spend the other half. And also remember, you are more influential in this child's life than the teacher. And they learn a lot from you on how, I mean, to speak, how to do things. Their work ethic is learned from you. And I think that parental involvement is crucial. Look at it. Many parents, when their children have become, I mean, a mess at home and everything, they send them to a school, so they say, this school has got good values. They expect these teachers to erase the damage they have done over the last 14, 15 years. That's not possible. Or even some, they expect universities to do the cleanup after messing up the person's life for 18 years. I think we need to have a national mindset. We need to tell parents, we need to tell everybody else that, look, education, I mean, of a child goes back to the African proverb that says, it takes a village to raise a child.
Wow, this village is very hesitant to
take back its own children.
We just want the teachers to do the job.
To take back its own children.
This suggestion that you could have a student, a national school student actually operating from home is a new one. For most parents in Kenya, and that will be a challenge. Yes. Before we wrap up our discussion this morning, I think we need to look at the change in syllabus as well. There's one headline on page 2 and an extension of the same on page 3, where head teachers have urged the government not to rush into implementing the new curriculum. And this is at the Kenya Primary School Head Teachers Association. They're having a conference in Mombasa, and this was discussed yesterday. The curriculum is supposed to be kicking off next year in phases. Some of primary school students, especially those in lower classes, will be affected immediately. But Dr. Gutu, what should inform us when it comes to this change in curriculum?
What should inform us is what we want to achieve. You should always have a vision. So what sort of graduates do we want to see coming out of our system? We know the kind of graduates we're getting now. People who know how to pass exams, they can cram and take an exam and 1 month later forget everything that it happened to all of us. We'll forget what we took in the exam. And so what are we left with the skill to memorize and no other skills. So you go into employment, you don't have the competencies employers are looking for.
Is this the kind of experience you're having at university level, that people coming from primary and high schools are simply crammers?
On most of the students that you get have been trained to cram. They've not been trained to speak, to lead, to work in teams, to be creative, to come up with new ideas. That's not what they were tested on. That's not what they were taught. And so they basically do what they were taught. And I look at it like a clean slate that we're given every year to take these students and turn them into anything we want them to become. If we turn them into crammers, that's what we're going to get. But it's a huge opportunity. Now, if we decide to make them think, to solve problems, to be concerned about the community, we can actually teach that. It's just a challenge that we have to give ourselves, paint that vision. And for me, the new system, the new curriculum is actually trying to do that. Just basically for people out there who don't know how it works, there are 3 major objectives. One is make them develop competencies, skills. That's one big circle. Then another big circle is values. Make them honest, hardworking people. And these are things we can teach. And then the third big circle is community. That idea of serving the community, solving problems in the community. So once we set these 3 big circles as our goal, we want students who have that by the time they graduate. They have competencies, they have good values, and they're ready to serve the community. It changes the ball game. We should have had it yesterday. So for me, the urgency is real. We need citizens who come out like that. Yes. And it's not that it's rushed in the sense that we're changing it overnight. It's actually staged. For me, it's going to take too long. We're just going to do the first 3 years next year.
Okay.
In 2019, we take the next phase. It's going to take a while.
But the concerns are real and should be taken into account as well. When Apollo Cheng, the teachers are saying, yes, it's a new system. There needs to be some level of training even for this. Teachers are going to implement it as well. Don't you think it's a serious concern?
It's a serious concern because if you look at it, as I said at the beginning, it's a very labor-intensive curriculum, very labor-intensive. There are very many assessments to be done in between, and now it is more learner-focused than the previous one, which was teacher and exam focused. So when something is learner focused, you realize that you have to spend a lot of time with this person because, as Dr. Butu is saying, you're not training them to cram and memorize, you are training them to be competent. And that's why there's a lot of practical element in this new program. I think, even as my learned friend here, who employs people, and there's been this trend where employers have been complaining that we don't have the right skill base in the industry, in the pool of people to be employed. And I think this is addressing that, because if you look at it, there'll be very little focus on exams, on assessment.
Yes. But do our teachers have that skill to actually impact?
At the moment they don't have, but if you've seen, in the pilot stage they were trained. November, December 2017, as we are talking, training is going on. All of us are going to be trained. And the key thing in this process would be a change of mindset. If we look at it that this is the solution to the complaints we've raised over the decades, we better give it a chance. Because other than this, what else? We've been complaining about 844, it's encouraging cramming and not encouraging competency. But this is the solution. So why don't we move together as a country, implement it? If it doesn't fail, it is our country. We can as well, if it doesn't succeed, it's our country. We can change it.
Okay. Anything to add on that?
Well, one of the opposition to the SGR was that it's going to kill businesses for truck drivers and buses and all that. And it had all manner of challenges, but it was implemented all the same. But today you never hear of those complaints. Yes. Reason is it is working. So yes, when something new is coming, there'll be fear for the unknown, and of course it will destabilize the systems that already are pre-existing. The reason for that is, who wants to be disrupted from a comfort? There are so many people who have already, over years, many years of 844, have had a lot of comfort in the system. In fact, have had a livelihood in the system.
Especially the teachers.
Yes. The teachers are able today to run supermarkets and still go to school, to run businesses and still go to school, because there's a lot of time.
And this one will not have that.
They won't have that. Yes. They will certainly have to dedicate themselves to the competence of the job, and that probably those are some of the fears that come with it. It won't be easy. There'll be so much friction in the process, but ultimately who benefits? It is the country, because we'll be producing leadership that has social skills, that has a vision, and that's a patriotism. Something that is completely lacking. Today what happens in 844 is, once you finish, in fact you dash to a sprint. Once you finish university, you want to drive a big car, you don't care about ethics at all, because that was never an issue during the times. In fact, the narrative has been, you have to go to school and get a good job and make money. And so there has been less emphasis on certain ethical issues, which then have now been put into place and focused as a matter of demand by the system.
Wow. Just to add, interesting, yes. Let me do this because we're coming to the end of our discussion. Let me give each one of you a chance to say one final statement, and then we'll wrap it up. We could start with you, Banoche.
Thank you. What I like about what he has said is that we are going to give focus now to blue-collar jobs. Over the last few years, we've been giving focus to white-collar jobs, and the economy has not been generating as many white-collar jobs as there are people who are willing to work. We have got very many universities. But we are shifting our focus from blue-collar jobs, which actually build an economy. If you look at many economies have been built on blue-collar jobs. So I think this new curriculum is going to give a renewed focus on blue-collar jobs, which are quite good and very rewarding. And also, as he has just said, I think people who are not willing to give their very best to the young should find another thing to do, because you cannot have a teacher who is always in school for classes only and is running every other thing outside there. And they are not focusing on the developmental aspects of this person, because you don't impart values in a class only. You have to be with this child. They need to see you practicing those values for them to believe in them. So for me, my parting shot would be, it's a good curriculum. As a country, let's start the change. If we need to change it in future, but which I doubt, because as you were saying with SGR, everybody complained at the beginning. But now everybody is saying, look, we've built many things around it and we're happy with it. No.
Wow. We really require major change in how we think from publishers, teachers, parents, everyone else to change. Dr. Gutu, final remarks.
I would urge Kenyans to be proactive. You have a lot more power than you think you do. So for the parents who want to see a better educational system, just make those demands, come together as a block, talk among yourselves, and then go and present your desires to the management and follow them up. You have the power to do that. For the teachers, in the new curriculum, you will be tested by how good you are at imparting skills. Don't be afraid about the new curriculum. If you become really good at doing that, you will be so marketable. People will come to you for special free tuition because you are empowering their children, and so you have that capability. Then for the students, even if you don't have facilities in your schools, we have a new world order where you can teach yourself on the internet, and you can become really good. Diego taught himself how to throw the javelin, became a world champion. If you watch this TED Talk called Hole in the Wall, which was done in India, you see how those kids educate themselves just by having access to the internet. And so the power is in your hands. You can become as good as you want to become. So I just urge Kenyans, stop waiting for somebody to do things for you. Take charge. Be proactive. The power is really in your hands.
Thank you, Dr. Finally.
Well, I think that Kenyans are very, very interesting lot. You see, they have the ability to overhaul an entire constitution. That's not something small. And they run with a new constitution and leave it. And it's working for us. We've seen how it's done for us, the many liberties that we have today. And now we are overhauling an entire education system. If you drop parity in the overhauling of the constitution and education, you begin to realize that Kenyans are very resilient. And there's nothing to fear whatsoever. If we can live with a new constitution, we certainly can live with a new education system. So we should just embrace it and know that change is ordinarily and obviously and always for the better.
Wow, change is always for the better. Thank you so much. George Kifi, advocate of the High Court, Paul Ochieng, lecturer at Strathmore University, the Dean of Students at the Strathmore University, and Dr. Vincent Ogutu, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Planning and Development at Strathmore University, helping us understand the big headlines this morning, Tuesday, the 5th of December 2017, of course, much to do with education matters. Thank you so much for also being a good audience. I know there's quite some feedback on Twitter and text messages as well. We'll be sampling that probably later on the show. Remember, Power Breakfast still continues up until 9. Man Cave is coming up. There'll be another interview just before that. So